All right. Unmute.
Are we live?
That we are live. We just went on a few moments early, so that way we can work out some of the kinks here.
Awesome.
This is my first time trying this, so we gonna see how it goes.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I just want to personally say thank you for taking the time to talk about something that has been blazing our social media feeds. And I'll be quite honest, as people are coming in and watching, that I've realized that the reason why there's so much misinformation or misunderstandings is because of lack of education. Like, people just don't know. They share things that are fits their narrative, their understanding. And so because of a lack of education is why people are posting things that are not 100% accurate. So we're going to talk about that here today. But if you could just please introduce to the world who you are. I know who you are. Like, we go way back. You know what I'm saying? Before we were woke. Yeah. So, you know, we've known each other for years. But go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I want to just first say thank you for having me on your platform. You know, I love you. You're my brother. I support everything that you do, all of your hustles, and obviously your wonderful ministry. So thank you for having me. And I'm glad that we can do this together.
Yeah, you're doing your thing too. I see the T-shirt. So can you please let the world know what you do outside of your work? Let them know.
So I teach full time. I'm a professor, but on the side, I started my podcast last year. It's called Black Women Be Well. And please visit our website for more information. I talk about health and wellness through the unique perspective of Black women. It's just another podcast to give us a voice, because we're oftentimes marginalized, forgotten, not a part of the conversation or research. So it's a great way for Black women to exchange, but also it's been really helpful for white women too. So for my white sisters, or even white brothers, if you wanted to do good work and want to learn about Black women and their experiences, this is a podcast for you too, to get a deeper dive in what it's like to be a Black woman in America. So
listen, I'll be listening. I'm just like, man, I feel so educated right now. You know what I'm saying? Like I was so ignorant to all of the things that you be sharing. So I do be tuning in. You know what I'm saying? It has been gaining a lot of traction. So that's it's awesome. Like, who would have imagined growing up the way we did? We're now put in this position to be a voice to kind of just lead and educate a movement. And so I appreciate the support and whatever we can do together to try to make change in our communities, we need to continue to do. But let's dive right into it.
Let's do it.
And the reason why I reached out to you is because you did a vent post on Instagram, and I was like, ooh, child. Shared it on my Instagram, and as soon as I shared it, people started sharing it, and I realized that it got some traction, and I saw the zeal, the passion behind it, and so that's why I reached out, because especially in the climate that we're dealing with, right? With the rioting and the protesting, people are forgetting the root cause as to why this is happening. And unfortunately, there's a lot of our counterparts, a lot of our friends who are using Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, not necessarily in context, to fit a narrative. And I know you've seen this one, all right? So this is the famous one that everyone's been sharing, where you may or may not be able to see it, but it says, never burned one building, never robbed one store, never destroyed one town, changed the world. All right. And a friend of mine, he crossed that out and he said, they still killed him. Right. So,
100%.
Yeah. Now, I want you, because you're not only you're an educator. And so you have knowledge of this type of history. And so can you please let the world know the truth about the civil rights movements and what Martin Luther King was really advocating for? And was he just a kumbaya, my lord, let's hold hands, sing songs, and went home? Or was there more to his message? Please share.
Absolutely. I think we forget Dr. King was about his business. And the version of him that we have now is, quite frankly, it's a whitewashed version. And we have to be really cognizant of the fact that he was murdered. And before, he could have been killed any time during his work. But when he was killed, it was very strategic. And I think at that time, people were mindful of turning him into a martyr. So upon his murder, you see that his narrative was quickly hijacked, quite frankly. And so what we get now is this very glorified, edified version or idealistic version of Dr. King. And he was very much human. And this is why that's problematic, because when we have a Dr. King that's almost godlike, it puts us in a position where we think we can't do what he did. And that's one issue. And the truth is, he was very much human. And we don't ever hear the fact that, he was a bit of a womanizer. He had some vices. I'm sure he had to talk to God about it and whatever he needed to do. So we don't humanize him enough to see that we can do what he did. And number two, we never get to hear his failures. The parts during the moments when, during the movement when he was most unsuccessful. And when he was unsuccessful, that's when we see white supremacists getting quick. They learn very quickly how nonviolent protests, the reality of nonviolent protests. And I think this is what you're speaking to in the first place, that it was a technique to demonstrate the actual violence in America. So SCLC, the organization that Dr. King was leading at the time, would go in and use nonviolent protesting, knowing that it would evoke violence. So it wasn't a peaceful protest. The thoughts in our heads are that they were singing songs down the street and all the white people were like, I'm going to listen. Y'all on something.
I want to join that. They sound good. They sing good.
I think y'all are on to something. And, they weren't talking to people in the streets like, hey, come here, let me teach you something. The fact of the matter the truth is that the protestings were done strategically, knowing that it would invoke violence from white people. And they knew that if they could capture that on the camera, it would demonstrate and show to the whole world how violent white supremacy is in our society. And it worked because the camera was a new thing at the time. News media was kind of new. It was heavily regulated. So we're used to turning on the TV and seeing all sorts of things. That was not the case at the time. So when white America finally realized, oh, wow, they're really killing Black people in the street, that allowed pressure for our local and state governments to feel enough pressure to make change. So it wasn't peaceful at all. These people were beaten. They were hauled away to prison. They had dogs sicked on them. It was not a peaceful experience at all. And it almost, in a lot of cases, also created riots. And the fact that people don't think riots happened in the civil rights movement is a little bit misguided, because we're left with this image of, almost like a godlike figure. All he did was come down and enter the streets, and everybody was like, he solved racism. What happened?
Right. And it's interesting you brought this up, because it shows that history does repeat itself, right? Mm-hmm. Childish Gambino, what's the song? This Is America. He's like, yo, that's silly. That's a tool. So Will Smith said this perfectly. Racism hasn't died. It's just being recorded, right? So what happened? Like, if it wasn't for those videos and that footage back then, we would never fully understand what MLK had to go through and endure. And even now, especially, everyone's kind of quarantined. There's nothing to distract them. They're seeing it. And it's like, I've gotten multiple calls and text messages throughout this week. So overwhelming, was like, I get it. I'm sorry. What can I do to implement change? Yeah. But it's interesting, because the same people who are mentioning that Martin Luther King advocated peaceful protests are the same Americans who forget that this country was, founded on violence, right? And now we're not advocating it. We're not saying, yes, go tear down the cities, and we're seeing the looting and things like that. We're not advocating for that. But this idea that if you can just do it this way, this is the right way. Well, Kaepernick showed that, hey, we did it the right way. And 6 years later, he's looking like a genius right now. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like he Martin Luther King didn't come, no, he got shot. He got murdered. And I want you to expand a little bit, and then you can, piggyback off whatever. Like, why was Martin Luther King the most hated man in America right before he died? Like, why was he one of those hated people? Because if he was such a man of peace, then truly everybody would just love him and embrace him. Why was he so hated?
He challenged the status quo. He perverted their order in their eyes. He shook up what, and it's the same reason why people are frustrated now. People that are in power are frustrated now. He wanted equity, and he did not want to keep order as it was. He wanted equity for all, and so it was a challenge to the status quo. And so you have a man, and also in the protests, remember, all of the protests were illegal at the time. We have legal laws now because of what happened then. So we have like desegregation, and you can't tell someone that they can't enter your stores or whatever. At the time, those laws didn't exist. So everything he did was defiance to the Black letter law. He literally broke laws. So the same thing we hear now from critics who are criticizing this, are saying, protest, but don't break laws. That's literally what Dr. King did. And when people would challenge him to that, he would say things like, I can't follow an unjust law. An unjust law is an unjust law. So I'm going to obviously break it. And he was hated for that. White people oftentimes, the response he got from white people was, you need to stay in place. You need to follow the proper channels. You need to do it the way we want you to do it. And this is where we get his letter from a Birmingham jail. He gets a letter from clergy that included rabbis, priests, and ministers, telling him things like, wait, you should use the regular judicial system. You should don't come out. We don't need you outsiders stirring up our good Negroes here. Essentially, those are the major themes in the letter. And so you see Dr. King responding in the letter from a Birmingham jail. And he's like, first of all, we've been waiting for 400 years. How much longer should we wait? Your judicial system, the criminal justice system, is not set up to actually advocate for us. And this is why we want change. And while we're breaking unjust laws so you can change them. And then there's obviously other themes in there, but he was hated for that. He was hated because he was attempting to challenge the status quo, and he was doing it in a defiant way, while white people were saying, do it in this way, and it's the same rhetoric you're hearing now. White, some people in power are saying, and not even just white, blacks alike are saying, you see those protesters, they need to do it this way. And to your point, we did do it that way. We literally have a great example of Colin Kaepernick using his powerful platform to protest peacefully. And what did we do? We had politicians hijack his actual message for political power. And then it becomes a thing about flags and disrespect and etiquette, instead of what he was trying to focus on is a reformation on criminal justice and police brutality. He literally did that.
And I want to piggyback off what you're saying, Colin, because just as you say, with Martin Luther King, he wasn't perfect in the process, right? But he was learning it as he grew. And same thing with Colin. Colin was not perfect in his beginning stages of what he was saying, but he got educated and he became more understanding of what he needed to implement that change. But you're right. It's this narrative that's constantly changing. Well, if you do it this way, and it's always the path of least resistance, whatever makes me racism, put it over there somewhere in that back little corner. I don't want to deal with it. And I think for the first time, Jennifer, and you can give me your opinion about this. This is the first time in my 35 years of life that I've seen everyone kind of just like, there's not a good majority of people are saying, I see it. I get it.
So here's what's happened. So this is why the hijacking of Dr. King's narrative is so important, where we have people that have made him a martyr taking his narrative and recreating this image that we have of Dr. King and saying, see, we did it. He's dead now, but we've solved civil rights. And in reality, his not everything was solved after his death, and police brutality was still happening. And there's lots of research that demonstrates that the KKK and white supremacists actually successfully entered into police force agencies, right? And this is why you see people this is why people are getting murdered in New York, in DC, in LA. It's just now there's no movement at the time to record it. Fast forward to the age of innovation, everyone has cameras, and we all have the ability to record now. There's no need for a TV studio to go in and record it like in Dr. King's time. Everyone is recording it now. It's further demonstrating that we never really solved all of the racial issues, even though Dr. King died. But somehow that narrative was hijacked, and white people, honestly, were told that. They were told there was this great man and he fixed it. And white America went back home and said, thank God, I can eat in the diner with a black person, racism is solved. And in reality, that we had areas still violently being violently attacked by police agencies. And then we see things like redlining happening, gerrymongering to control the Black vote. We have educational disparities and laws that are put into place, local laws put into place to further segregate. So Dr. King, his whole movement was desegregation. Then why is Chicago so hyper segregated? Because other things were put in place really to keep the status quo. So we moved forward, but things weren't solved at all. There was still more work to happen, but we've controlled this narrative of Dr. King saying that, see, he died, but everything is fixed. And here's white America saying, oh, snap, they were right. It wasn't fixed. And now they're seeing it like, wow, yeah, I didn't know. Right.
So you brought up a point about the narrative. What can we do? Because the number one thing that I've asked, what can I do? What can I do? And so the first thing I say, hey, watch 13th or, watch this documentary. Yeah. But how can we educate people? Because here's what I'm seeing. There's a lot of facts on both ends of the spectrum. They're both true, but they don't fit into the overall arcing, story to make those facts negate. Those facts are out of context to the bigger story that's really at hand, right? Yeah. So how does racism, show me examples of racism within the country, and then all of these stats are then spewed, and you can't deny the facts, but there's still, it's being omitted for a bigger picture. So how can we help people see the true narrative of what's happening, as opposed to just fact checking things and then using this information to fit my understanding of something? What are some suggestions or resources or anything that you can suggest to give to help people?
I think that what you speak to is really true, that people pick and choose what information to quickly share on social media. I think that's the first step, is to recognize that cannot be your only source for information. And I would even suggest to take a fast from it for a while and do some other, if that's your only source, find some others. That's the first thing, that we have to look for education from other places. The other thing, there needs to be some kind of internalized shifting happening. So I would recommend for people, Black and white alike, because they're going to have different experiences in terms of how they need to get educated. But for Black and white alike, take some time and really reflect on, how am I receiving education? So for example, for someone that is highly privileged, maybe they're affluent and rich, affluent in a higher socioeconomic tier, and they're racially white, they would need to reflect, where have I gotten most of my knowledge about race and history? If it was from a predominantly white school taught by predominantly white teachers, you probably have some blind spots. If a lot of your education comes around the dinner table, I hate to say it, your parents might be a little bit internally racist, or there might be a chance.
Yeah.
And if that's your only source of information is what you guys exchange during Thanksgiving when your uncle says something really random, your drunk uncle says something random, take time and really reflect. Where is predominantly my education of race and history coming from? And then once that internal reflection happens, now you're ready to, and you hold the mirror to yourself and say, wow, yeah, I've been living in an echo chamber my whole life. I need to get some outside help. I'm an educator, I'm a professor, so I'm a big advocate for college. So take all of the multicultural classes you can, things about Black people, Indigenous people, but obviously that's an expensive way to do it if you don't have financial aid. And obviously I have a bunch of books that I think are great resources. And if you want to know the true picture of the civil rights movement, there's a book by Harvard. It's called King, Harvard Sitkoff, and he gives a true picture of Dr. King. So you get the good, bad, and ugly. And it's not in any way to defame him, but it really does help humanize him in a way where you can kind of relate, like, wow, if he could do this and he had this problem, I could do it. And then you get a real picture of him. There's also a great book called Freedom's Daughters. It's the civil rights movement, the whole history of the civil rights movement, but told from the perspective of women. And so you see how much women are grassroots leaders and organizers. And then you also see, wow, there were some missed opportunities because of misogyny for Black women to be recognized as leaders. And that's something that we still deal with even today. But at least that book captures their stories that's often left out of history. And then, like you said, there's a bunch of films you can watch. If you don't like to read and you're not triggered, and you're triggered through film, you need to get into circles with people that know stuff so you can learn. And that's another thing. Let's just start talking with each other.
So you're telling people they need to get a Black friend if they don't have one?
Wait. Let me correct that. What I was speaking to was affinity spaces. Black people need to get around some Black people that know something. Find you a mentor or a group. And the same thing with white people. If you know that your social circles typically says the same thing over and over again, and it's not anything progressive, you might need to find some other white friends, right? And learn and grow from there. I do love also the ability for the races to cross over and to talk to each other, but a lot of Black people do not have the emotional bandwidth to deal with it. So I don't recommend white people saying I need to find a Black friend. you know. But if you find someone who's willing, like I often tell especially white women, if you need someone to talk to, I'm willing to listen to your potentially challenging thoughts to help you work through them if you want to work through them. Now, I oftentimes also do that for a fee. We could set up some coaching questions because it is emotionally draining. I have done that before.
All right.
So,
but listen, I the reason we jokingly said that, but I'm glad that you gave that point, because I have a lot of minority friends, Black friends. I graduated from Evans High School, went to all private school at Forest Lake Academy, got kicked out, didn't stay too long, right?
Wait a minute. Can I just acknowledge the fact that I'm so proud of you, bro? Like,
say what?
I knew Lawami. Y'all don't really know Lawami. I knew Lawami back in Tampa, Lawami. Y'all don't even know.
No, don't talk about Tampa. Don't talk about.
He brought us from a mighty long way.
They don't know. Hey, that's just a blip in history. No one knows about Tampa Lawami. Let's not. Oh, I'm sweating that now. Oh, I totally forgot. I totally.
That one was out there. Yeah. Praise
Lord have mercy.
All I gotta say.
God is good all the time. Mercy. Yeah.
You got a message now, bro. Go ahead.
But I went to a multicultural school, at a private school at Forest Lake, got kicked out. And to be honest, when I went to Evans, it was an eye-opening experience. And man, I think, I grew up in Pine Hills. I was the only light-skinned Puerto Rican boy there. Multi-Caribbean church. I thought I was Jamaican at one point, man. It was
honorary.
Yeah. But as I got older, I've been able to, especially within the lines of ministry, I've been able to work with a lot of non-blacks, a lot of whites, and over time I've had good developed good friendships, and one in particular, I won't say his name, but we have those uncomfortable conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And he calls me out on my stuff, like, Lo, that sounds kind of low-key racist. So how you gonna tell me I'm racist, white boy from Mississippi? You don't know, what I'm saying? It's like, but it was that same place, but where people don't like friction. And I think that people have to understand friction allows movement to happen.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, and so one thing I have done is not the biggest thing in the world, but every time I see a white person post something that is fighting for the cause, I affirm them and I say, thank you for being a voice. And it's amazing. It's like, what can I do? I was like, if you ever need to talk, ask me the uncomfortable questions. Like create a safe place where people's like, hey, I have these, it's okay. Like, now don't put, sometimes we kind of just go on Facebook and just post everything. And then we're dealing with 30, 40 knuckleheads and right. But that that one-on-one relationship that, hey, I've created a safe place for friends of mine who I've always talked about this stuff, but they never understood it. And now they're like, yo, Lo, I'm with you, bro. Like, hey, can I ask you a question? Absolutely. And they're like, oh, please just say it. You know what I'm saying? And so
you have a patience a lot of people don't have. Because I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'd rather you ask me about my hair than to ask Tanya, because Tanya ain't got time for it. I'm always like, come here, Sally, come.
Can I touch your hair? No, don't touch my hair.
And I'd be like, come ask me. I don't mind, because like you're saying, there does need to be some interpersonal connection between us. And let me tell you, white people do not like to talk about race, because it is true that a lot of times when they bring it up or they say something, it's immediately met with an emotional reaction, because our nation has not restored this race. They have not publicly admitted to any wrongdoing in terms of slavery. We have not gotten any retribution. I could even throw out the whole reparations thing, but we have not been restoratively brought back. And so there's a lot of hurt still, even after 400 years. There's still a lot of vicarious hurt and generational hurt. So when someone says something, and you could get an emotional reaction, and it's 100% justified, right? And so they are afraid to say anything, even if it's for an educational purpose, like, let me share so you can help me. So I'm oftentimes kind of like, I come in like what you do with your friends, like, bro, it's okay. This is a safe space.
Right.
Ask me. And they say off the wall stuff. And I sit there and I'm like, let me help you. And then the next day I'm booking a counseling session. From my own mind.
Right.
But you have that kind of patience too. You allow for that space. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah, and so are we going to be willing to listen and hear, or are we just going to, hey, this is the way I think, this is the way I am, and you're right, I'm wrong, and we can never make true progress with that. But yeah, not everyone is patient, so position yourself in a way where you can grow and you have to get uncomfortable if you want to grow. If you're a fitness instructor, if you don't get uncomfortable, you're never going to grow, right? Your muscles, you're never going to be able to build endurance. And so more now than ever before, I'll be honest, I haven't shared this yet, but I figured it's timely. Like, I went to Publix. I shared this on Facebook Live. Like, this older white lady, she was checking out my groceries, and she just basically said, I want you to be safe. it warmed my heart. I was like, oh, thank you. Like
Aw.
being Black right now, it's like people are so sympathetic. Now I'm walking around my neighborhood. No lie. I promise to my Father in heaven. I'm walking around the neighborhood. I have my AirPods on and I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm, hey. I'm like, the first reaction is like, what?
Yeah.
And it's an older white gentleman, maybe about 50 years old, kind of scruffy looking with a dog. He's like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm good. He was like, just know I'm with you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. But Jennifer, here's the reality. I think people are being so overly nice, but my first reaction was fear.
Absolutely. Hey, I felt it too. I was like, who did what?
Yeah. And then notice that you say like, hey, fear. So understand that this overwhelming love and acceptance hasn't been felt the way that ever. And we're seeing that now. We don't know how to accept it because we've always been a people of resistance. Like you walk into a room and you know people are seeing you because of your locks. People are seeing me because of my fitted hat and I'm wearing a shirt that says oppression, whatever the case may be. And so now people are, because there's always a paradigm shift. Like I've been a butthead the whole my life, and now I'm going to be overly nice, and we don't know how to accept that.
Absolutely.
And so now it's like it's cool now. But Jennifer, my question to you: what can we do moving forward? Not only from the educational field, and I hope once we're done, you can kind of share the books and the references on the comments below, so people can get access to that. I know I will. I have so many books I got to read. But what can we do to help people embrace and better understand the civil rights movement, but help people understand that history repeats itself and the lessons, the positive lessons we can learn from the past, how can we implement those things now to really implement change? And I'm going to conclude with that because I'm going to talk about one more thing that I know is a hot topic for you, but I just wanted to see if you can give me some insight on that.
So you're talking about not just the educational thing, but what else can people do personally or socially for change?
Yeah. We admire Martin Luther King Jr. civil rights movement. We're seeing that there's a call for change. What can our white friends and our white counterparts do to not only protest with me arm in arm and say we're with you, but what can people do to really make change within our construct, our within our system? Because it's good to Black Lives Matter fist and blackout, but like there's more than just that we need to do. So
absolutely. So I totally agree too that there's this. I've never gotten so many text messages from white colleagues before ever during any of the other times there's been a shooting that was put on TV. Like, so I agree. Like, there's this, and I'm sure a lot of other Black people have experienced this overly supportive gestures from white America. And I think that in a lot of ways they don't know what to do. And so that's at least something they can do. And I commend them for that. And so I think that in a lot of ways, they don't know what to do and they can't ask us because it's not our burden to tell them what to do, right? Mm-hmm. So I would really recommend that some white Americans go do some therapy and really do some mental health therapy about how racism may have affected them. And I don't know any therapists that really specialize in that type of therapy, but we have to really understand that race issues don't just impact Black people. They also negatively impact white people. And this makes me think of, if you read any any African-American literature from slavery themed literature, like for example, Frederick Douglass's narrative of a slave, he makes commentary on how he saw how much racism created brutality in his slave masters, and in particularly the masters' wives, and they were the most brutal, so that they could act like their slave masters or to show that they too have some control. So that's an example, right, of how slavery or racism has created unhealthy white Americans. And so if we look at it as almost like a sickness, they need to get treatment. And I don't know if they've ever approached their own mental health in that way. How has racism impacted me negatively in the things that I do and in my behavior? And this is how we get at Amy Cooper. Amy Cooper, I read her credentials. She's like super progressive, she's like a Democrat. And if you notice in her phone call, she doesn't say a black man is attacking me. She says an African-American man. Right. But she knows the terminology, the politically correct terminology, and yet she still has internalized racism. Where did you get that from? You need to dig deep in how racism has affected you. I think once that happens, I mean, that doesn't have to happen first. But
I guess a simple question that most people just have to ask, do I have any racial bias?
Yes.
And ask that question and then I guess start from there and then research and then lead
and get off social media. You need to be about it. Don't post things like I wish I could do more. You can. You got to do it now. You got to be out in these streets with these young protesters. Or I'm not meant for protesting. That's not my skill set.
Pray for me because I gotta do one today, and I'm nervous as I'll get out. I cried earlier because I'm
see, you got legs and you got stamina. You're good. You're good. I would need a break every 10 minutes, but I'm But see, we need people on the ground, and then you have others, the strategy people in the back. And I was just talking to my mentor today. He's actually going to be on WMFE tomorrow's show at 12. It's called the Intersection Show.
Where can they check that out?
WMFE tomorrow at 3 p.m. He's going to be on the show Intersection.
Okay.
And he was saying how now that the young people are protesting, now we have to have our strategists. Like, he has a law degree. I'm the professor. I know the history. And then we need some white people in the room for those types of things because they have access to spaces we don't have access to. They have access to resources we don't have access to. And so it's time for them to leverage their privilege and their resources for action. If you can't be in the streets, there's other things you can do. If you're an educator, change the way you teach, make it be more inclusive. If you're a lawyer, start doing some pro bono cases or start doing some work with ACLU. If you're whatever it is, you need to do it. It's time to, not just say, I wish I could do more. You literally can. You
use your sphere of influence, your career, whatever it is.
Yes.
Immerse yourself in the cause. So we're going to conclude with that. Thank you. But we're going to conclude with this question because I appreciated the history of the civil rights movement and what Martin Luther King was fighting for. But there was something that I was like, you took off your glasses, girl. You was just like, I am tired of sick and tired being sick and tired. And so we're going to talk about it. And I don't know how much time we're going to spend on talking about this, but like, I know what you was referring to because, not all cops are bad, Jennifer.
Okay.
Not all cops are bad.
Okay.
Please share your thoughts because you keep talking about, blue lives matter too, and all cops aren't bad. Please.
The point of that video was to stay on topic. Stop gaslighting us. And if you could really look at this as a toxic relationship, and if you're a female watching this show, when a man has gaslighted you, that was the most frustrating thing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this. Why are you bringing up other stuff? And I think it's just people that want to keep the status quo. They don't like, they want to keep order as it is. And then they throw up all these other topics when the topic is very clear. There needs to be criminal justice reformation, and we should end police brutality. So it's a logic thing. Of course, not all cops are bad.
Right.
What point is that? What is the point with that? It's the same thing. All lives matter is the gaslighting technique.
But and it's funny. There's a comedian. I forget his name. The Saturday Night Live. He was just making the point. He was like, "We just said Black Lives Matter. Not more important. Not less. Matter. Just." Matter. People got upset. It's like, we just matter. So the fact that you say all lives matter, yeah, we're saying the same. Like, matter. We matter.
Of course. Of course, all lives matter. And why are we saying basic stuff? Y'all sound real simple. Yes, that's not even, who is arguing against that? Right. Of course, all lives matter. We are saying, essentially, all lives matter is equivalent to we exist. You have a problem with acknowledging my existence? That is off topic.
So it's counterproductive, because if you're not agreeing that my life matters, and really do I really exist in your universe?
Then it's a fallacy in your argument. If by saying all lives matter is to make the conclusion that I should not say Black lives matter, that is literally a fallacy. It's illogical. If anything, you can say all lives matter, and this is why I'm going to help you out, because it's true. Black lives matter. What happened with that? It was, that term Black Lives Matter was hijacked by politicians to make a political point. Period. It was, that's how us saying we exist became a political ploy.
Right.
And it's not us against cops. That's never, us against bad cops. My uncle, and then you always hear, my uncle is a cop. Mine was too. He's great. I know another Black dude that's a cop. He's dope.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not talking about them. We're talking about the bad ones, though.
Yeah, that no one seems to be, calling out in.
Let's solve this right now. Okay, guess what, Luami? There are some good cops. Let's clap it up for the good cops. Matter of fact, every time I see you, I'm gonna give you daps.
Right.
If I could cook for you, I will. Back on topic. There's some really bad ones, man. Okay, let's get back.
Yeah.
Let's get back on topic.
Can we talk about the bad ones for a minute? Can we just talk about the bad ones? And it's unfortunate, because we're within the Black community, we're stuck in this, rock in a hard place, right? Because at one end, we know that the authorities are there to help protect us, but then when they call, when we call them, we're expecting them to protect and to serve us, but it's just always this fine line where it's like, are they going to, question me? And so it's so important, especially amongst police officers, the good ones, to call out the bad ones. Yes. Because by simply doing that, you're regaining the trust of so many people. So many people. Because when you start gaslighting, as you said, and start people saying, well, it's like you're trying to ignore my experience. You're trying to make it feel like my reality isn't true.
You're the crazy one, Luana. Yeah. You're the bad one.
Right. Yeah. And so this I don't think people understand. This is refreshing to hear my friends who are not of minority descent, Black or, but my white friends and Asian friends that are like, Lo, I understand. It's like, for 20 years of my life, I've been saying this one way and another. And it's like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy for feeling and thinking this. So thank you. So just the fact that you're simply saying good cops matter, when we know that, is dismissing what I am seeing, experiencing, and my reality of what I'm living in.
We have to dismantle the blue code of silence, and that blue code of silence fraternity type of environment that they live in is rooted in white supremacy. And there's lots of research that demonstrates that the KKK infiltrated police agencies across the nation in the 60s and 70s. And so this whole blue code of silence, where I see a bad cop and I don't say anything because we're frat brothers, it needs to be dismantled. And to your point, I hear people say, I've always had good experiences with cops. That's great. But there are a lot of people that are going to tell you that they haven't, and that they actually don't feel safe when cops are around. How can you imagine how freeing that it would be for us to have a group of people saying, wow, I didn't know that, I hear you, and maybe you're right, instead of getting it flipped around that, no, you're crazy. What? Cops are perfect. You're the problem. You should have done this. Black man, you should have had your pants up. You should have spoken in perfect English. It was your fault. You're crazy.
How often do we see these videos? And there's been more than one video where a police officer is gun out, hands up, come down, don't move, do this, get your, and it's like you're shouting 15 commands. And it's like you're doing the robot. Then they are fearful. They shoot. And it's like, well, they should have just complied. To which command? Because they shot out 15 of them.
Yeah.
I was confused as to what I should do because I'm stop. And so I, again, the purpose of why we're bringing this up, we understand that not all cops are bad. There are very good cops. You know, actually, the protest that we're going to be doing later this afternoon, the police department is going to be going with us. Awesome. What we are discussing is for our friends and our colleagues, our people who are in our we are simply addressing the bad ones, and we want you to acknowledge the bad ones for the for the peace of our own mind, that we're not crazy and you're seeing what we're seeing. And this is why unfortunately had to take the death of George Floyd in order and the pandemic to happen. I mean, it was a perfect storm to allow the world, not just America, the world to see, whoa, we have a problem.
Yeah.
And so I realized that in order for us to really execute change, we have to talk about it. We have to educate people. But then the last step is like, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Because
to your point, you said the pandemic, this is the perfect storm, because this isn't the first death we've seen, live execution we've seen. And it's not the first time Blacks have protested or organized to talk about this. This has been going on for the last 30 years. This isn't the first time that it's happened. But what you said makes perfect sense, that we have time now. We got time today. Ain't nobody at work. Everybody furloughed or laid off. We had time. And then we watching the TV, so we seeing it all the time. We was like, oh, heck no.
Yeah. Girl, bubble coat, we going out.
Yeah, and that's
sanitizer.
That's really the only reason why we're able to do what we're doing, is because, wow, we're not so distracted by this machine of capitalism that we actually have the mental bandwidth and the time to do some of this protesting. Because, you know, and you asked this question earlier, you said, what can our colleagues do? And to your point, maybe after you say, hey, I'm with you, the next thing they can start doing is say, I believe you.
Believe
a Black person when they tell you they experience. And don't rationalize it for them or tell them what you think it is. If a Black person tells you, man, I've never felt safe around cops, and you hear like 5 people say the same thing, man, that might be real.
I wish there was a bomb that could. I need to get there's effects and stuff in the. Man, don't just believe me.
Believe me. See me.
You know what? I'm not going to take too much of the time. I just want to personally say thank you for taking the time to educate, to inform, to share, and this platform. I guess we go way back, so there's an understanding between you and I that most people may not understand. So we're going to joke about certain things that people may not feel comfortable joking about. But I wanted to create some sort of a platform, do a video, do something that people can watch and say,
yeah,
I'm going to read, I'm going to study, I'm going to, utilize my influence, my privilege to help if truly we are about the change and all lives matter and Jesus died for everyone. Hey, it's so true. So when we are crying out, we need help. Help us. Believe us.
Yes.
We're not trying to exact, at least for mine, I don't need to exact. And it's funny because even now, Jennifer, and I'm being completely transparent, I am so hesitant to share stories from my past in the world and in the church about how I've been treated and the racism that I experienced, because I don't want people to think I'm clout chasing. You understand what I'm saying? Like, everybody wants to share their story, like, what was me? And I'm hesitant to do that, but we need to share our stories. We need to say, hey, this is my experience. And when I share it, don't say, well, Fox shows us, Loami, that the statistics in your the list. Do you feel me, bro?
Just feel me.
Feel me. Do you hear me? Do you believe me? Because listen, the facts are there, but what created those facts? What created those numbers? What allowed, I'm just not a checklist. I'm just not a statistic. I am a person. I'm a human being. And if one person received injustice, that's one person too many. And so that's what I wanted to share. Thank you so much. Your podcast tomorrow, are you going to be, it's not your podcast. What are you doing tomorrow?
Oh, tomorrow, listen to Intersection, WMFE. It's 90.7 FM. My graduate school mentor, his name is Dr. Sma. He will be on there talking about some of the stuff we talked about. And he's like, he got the facts here. So you can come out there with a pen and paper and just, yes, he can fiddle them off. So.
All right. And also, go ahead, check out her podcast, blackwomanbewell.com. Support Black businesses, influencers, and all the above. Jennifer, love you, girl. Thank you so much. And to everyone else, hopefully this was a blessing. This was educational. Jennifer, she'll link up her podcast, the radio interview tomorrow, as well as the books and references. But please, if there's anything you can do, simply share this and say watch. Must watch. All right. Hopefully this is the beginning, a start of something new, something that we can implement change. Again, to everyone who watched, appreciate you, Jennifer. We'll keep in touch.
And thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Blessings, y'all.